Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us today for this webcast on Infosec and Amazon Web Services, a new way to train for your AWS certifications. My name is Jeff, and I'll be moderating the session today. And the series, we have 5 more webinars coming up on the AWS certifications each week. But now let's welcome Keytron. He is Infosec's VP of Portfolio and Product Strategy. And you likely know him if you've attended our previous webinars, watched any of his training videos, or saw him speak at various conferences around the country. Welcome back, Keytron.
Thank you very much, Jeff.
Yeah, so today we're just going to let everyone know about our new Infosec partnership with AWS, that we're now an authorized provider of live boot camps for the AWS certifications. Keytron's going to cover just a little bit of the cloud market overview. I think the bulk of the presentation today is going to be a demo showing the power of the cloud and kind of some of the stuff you'd actually be learning in these AWS certification boot camps. Then we're going to take a few minutes today just to go over those 5 new AWS boot camps that we have available and how the training works for those. And then every Wednesday for the next 5 weeks, we'll actually have a webinar, a 30-minute webinar covering each of those in more detail. So if you're interested in one of those particular 5 that we talk about today, know that we'll have a webinar that's really going to dive into the specifics of that certification and that boot camp coming up shortly. So with that, we can go ahead and kick it off. We actually just recently became an AWS authorized training provider for these live boot camps, so pretty exciting. I know AWS is quite popular, as we'll talk about in the coming slide, but I don't know, Keytron, if there's anything you want to say up top here about this new partnership and what it means for us and our students.
Yeah, sure. One of the things, like when I was in the classroom teaching, I would say probably the last 10 years, one of the things I've told every student, whether you were taking a certified ethical hacker course from me or incident response or threat hunting, whatever it may have been, one of the things that I've said consistently for the last at least 5 years for sure is like, look, all these skills that you're learning in this class this week, if you're not able to merge or marry that skill set with understanding, have operational hands-on knowledge of cloud technologies, in a few years, those skills are going to become obsolete because, everything has to have that cloud piece to it. If I'm doing pen testing, you need to now learn cloud pen testing. If we're doing incident response, you need to know how to respond to incidents in the cloud. If you're threat hunting, you need to know how to hunt threats in the cloud. And a key component of that is having a foundational and to some extent operational knowledge of how cloud technologies work. Because contrary to popular belief, it's not just a matter of taking all of your data, taking all of your operations and all of your applications, dropping them on to AWS and saying we're done. It's a lot more involved than that, a lot more complex. But if you approach it the right way and learn the technologies before you try to wrap security around it, it makes a lot more sense and you end up with a much more holistic, not only operational process, but security processes as well.
Awesome. Yeah, let's dive a little bit into some of the numbers around AWS and the cloud market. Probably no surprise here. Basically, going back to what you're saying, the cloud market's growing. 678 billion, I think, is the anticipated growth this year, according to Gartner. And AWS is really the top dog when it comes to cloud. Not sure if there's anything you want to say here. I assume that's kind of aligned with what you've been seeing with the students in the industry as well, everyone moving to the cloud.
Yep, absolutely. And like I said, like companies are doing this. Like I know of several organizations where they've pretty much sent out communications to the technical staff, like, hey, if you're a network engineer, even if you got 20 years experience being a network engineer, in 18 to 24 months, you're going to need to evolve into a cloud network engineer. If you're a security architect, you're going to need to evolve into a cloud security architect over the next 18 to 24 months, because that's the initiative we have. We've moved to AWS, so now we have to upskill or adjust your skills to match that, because these threats are not going away just because we migrate to cloud.
And if you attended our webinar with Brett Fund and the ISACA CEO, I think it was before the holidays, they had an interesting report. They do it's like the 2023, state of cybersecurity report. And one of the stats we pulled from there is cloud skills was actually the number one. Well, it's actually the number two gap. Number one was soft skills like communication, but number two was cloud skills. So according to ISACA and a lot of the research out there, that's really the biggest gap that employers are finding. So I think there's definitely going to be a lot of value for these certifications in AWS in particular. So maybe we could just take a minute or so, on each one and just, walk through and explain a little bit of what each of these are. And then for the folks on the call, if you're interested in learning more about any of these 5 certs, we should have links in the follow-up email and in other places to be able to join the specific webinar where we'll, kind of briefly, in 15, 20 minutes, dive into each one in more detail in the coming weeks. So I'll throw it over to you to talk about the Solutions Architect certification.
Sure. Yeah, for sure. So the Solutions Architect certification really sets you up to learn how to architect business solutions in AWS, right? This includes everything from, if you think about it, how do I take my business from how we do business now with our own local servers or our premise servers, our premise applications, what's our strategy? How do we build out and architect a solution in AWS that mirrors and even enhances how we do business now? That's really kind of the goal of a solutions architect. And to me, this was kind of like my foundational certification. Like the first Amazon AWS certification I obtained was the solutions architect professional. Now, this is the associate level. When we look at the associate level, which is what we're talking about here, it gets more down into the weeds of like, okay, once we've architected out what that solution looks like, how do we go in? How do we build those servers out? How do we build those databases out? Which types of databases should we be using? How do we put that into place? How do we make all these things communicate with each other properly? What's the application footprint look like? How do we build out these applications? That's what the solutions architect is, right? So the solutions architect's job role would really come into place after the solutions architect professional kind of designed out what it's going to look like. And the associate would be the person that would go in and actually fill in those gaps and build out the solutions that the architect has architected. So this is kind of like what I would consider to be your entry-level professional certification, where you're getting hands-on and that type of thing.
Awesome. Then we have the cloud operations, which I believe was previously called the SysOps administrator, but Amazon recently changed it to cloud operations administrator. So you want to talk a little bit about that one?
Yeah. So the SysOps or cloud ops administrator really focuses on just, deploying, managing, and operating AWS workloads, right? Like making it more efficient, like how should things be operating? And this is really important because one of the challenges, one of the things that I hear people say sometimes when they don't have a good strategy, when they migrate to cloud, is they say, well, when we migrate everything to cloud, our month-to-month cost actually is more than it was when we were on premise. And a lot of times that's because they didn't have this piece covered. They didn't understand workloads, workflows. They didn't understand how to do optimization in that AWS environment. And a lot of things about cost and optimization comes into this. What's going to be the cheapest way to do this while still getting the job done at a level that we need. These are kind of some of the topics that are key in the cloud ops administrator.
All right, then we got the DevOps engineer.
Yeah, DevOps engineer. That's really taking your traditional developers, people that do development, and kind of getting them up to speed on how to develop in an AWS environment more effectively and efficiently, but also getting them more onto the operational side. When we look at how DevOps is really the combining of operations and development, this certification is kind of the pinnacle of that. It's kind of like the key to that. The key of that, it kind of brings it together in a way that a developer would be learning lots of new skills, but also digging more into operations. Because when you think about how we operate on premise or in a local environment, a lot of the operations pieces are things that are removed from a developer and they don't touch them. But when you move the cloud, there's obvious reasons why developers that are building out these applications need to understand and be ingrained in operations a little more. For example, when we look at infrastructure, One of the most efficient ways to do that is infrastructure as code, or infrastructure as an application, or all these other things, infrastructure as a service. These are all pieces of code. So instead of having a physical router and a physical switch and physical hardware that's the backbone of your network, from your perspective as an AWS customer, that is all code. You don't ever touch or have access to the hardware, so your physical infrastructure turns into code now. And this is why DevOps engineer is such a critical and key role, like in your strategy for migrating to AWS.
Awesome. Then we have the final two here. These are the more specialty certifications, once you move beyond like associate and professional. So can you talk a little bit about the security specialty here?
Yeah, so this is the first specialty certification I personally earned, and it was one of the more challenging, but it's around security, right? Securing the AWS environment, security considerations. How do you make sure things are secure? You really dig deeper into things like IAM, identity and access management. You dig into the AWS available firewall and security technologies. You get into some of one of the things that I found amazing when I got into the security certification side of AWS is there are so many features and capabilities that are built into the product that people just don't even know about, right? So we've been able to, I've helped customers actually save money by not having to have some of the security solutions that they pay lots of money for, because there's something comparable or better that's just baked into the AWS ethos. And if you know about it, you can provision these things usually or a lot of times at a much lower cost point. So that's what that is how do you secure that environment?
And last but not least, we have machine learning. I'm sure there's be a lot of interest in that with all the AI stuff going on lately.
Yeah, this is the most recent certification I obtained. I got it in January of last year, and then I recerted up just about a couple of months ago. And it is for sure the most difficult one that I've ever taken as far as AWS exams. But this is how you now take your organization to the next level, because you're digging into machine learning, you're digging into the AI capabilities of AWS. You learn about things such as Bedrock, Kinesis, you learn about, SageMaker, just all kinds of AWS products that are built around and built for you to lean into machine learning and AI. So this was kind of like my favorite, although it was the most difficult, because it's an area that my mind is very much focused on these days. So this is the one that allows you to take all the things that you've learned as far as, I know my business, now I've learned how to know my business inside AWS. How can I now revolutionize my business with AI? That machine learning certification is the step into that direction. This is how you get to where you can take all the other things that you've learned as far as DevOps, security, solutions architect, SysOps, or cloud ops, and now that you understand all your workflows and your processes, how do we automate, speed up, make these things super, super efficient and effective using AI? And that machine learning certification puts you as a professional in a position to empower your organization to do
that. So now, if you want to go ahead and show us a little bit about how AWS works and give us a demo.
Yeah, sure. So when I was kind of deciding like what I wanted to demo, one of the things that I wasn't sure of is, just really what, like who the audience should be that I target, right? And kind of what I decided is, let's just assume like some of the people on here are new to cloud technologies, new to AWS, and don't really have any background. So what I want to walk you through is just some of the powerful things, like some of the reasons that your organizations have decided that you're moving to cloud or that you have moved to cloud. Because a lot of technology workers and a lot of people in the industry, especially in security, may not understand like the justification, right? It's like, well, I mean, it's still servers, it's still machines, we still have to protect the data. What's the difference? We've always had cloud. We've always been doing cloud. If you use somebody else's computer, it's cloud. Like these are things I hear day in and day out. But I kind of want to start here with just a little bit of an education on this a little bit and say that while we have always had servers and networks and WANs and use other people's computers, some of the things that really make cloud services unique is just the application side, right? Like we have something called rapid elasticity, which means that instead of, we've always had the ability to scale up. So if we need to go into a data center and purchase 20,000 servers to do like some workload that we have to do every week, then we could always go into a data center and purchase that hardware and that rack space to do that. But then it comes to bringing that back down. You generally have to purchase those contracts on 6 months, year, 5-year terms. Whereas with technologies like AWS, I can go in and build 1,000 servers with major capacity. And if I only need to use those servers for an hour, I can stand them up, use them for an hour, and then shut them down and only pay for that hour. So these are the types of rapid elasticity types of capabilities that we get. And this is one of the 5 features that make up cloud technologies. We'll talk about others maybe in another webinar, but that's one of the main ones I want to stress. And then the ease of how you can do things. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to stand up a new server and build a website and make it available to all of you on this webinar in just a matter of a few minutes. Knock on wood.
Hey, real quick, Keytron, would you be able to make that window full screen? It looks like you're seeing your whole desktop, so that might make it a little better. Perfect, thanks.
Yeah. So what I want to do here is I click launch instance. That means I want to create a virtual machine, which is what we're defining as an instance here. So it's the same as if you were to build a physical computer on your desktop or a physical server, and you want to build it out and make it so that people can access it. So when I create this instance, a couple things are happening. One, it's creating that virtual machine, but it also either creates or puts me in something called a VPC, which is a virtual, it's basically your virtual private cloud. So it's your piece of the cloud that Amazon's giving you for you to build out your network and your resources into, right? So if I go, let's say I want to build a Windows server. So I'm going to click Windows here. And one of the other things I want to kind of shortly point out here is when I'm building this server, look at the capacities that I could build, right? So I could stay in the free tier range and build pretty much anything I want, but I'm going to go to, let's go base here. And then look at these instance types. So here's something I want to show you all, something that everybody can kind of grasp. So when I scroll up and look at these, I'm going to go, I could actually right now build a server. Let's get to some of the bigger capacities here. Now, mind you, these things aren't always free. I'm not saying that, but I do want to show you what you can build. So let's go here. All right, so look at this server right here, the capacity. I could click this and I would be able to build a server that has 128 processors and 4 terabytes of RAM. Yep, you heard that right, 4 terabytes of RAM. I could build that, and there are a lot of high compute, high memory utilization types of application and things that I could use where I might need that kind of power. Think about some of the AI stuff, some of the machine learning models and things like that we may want to simulate and run locally or in a contained environment. We can build that now. And if I wanted to just run that model for an hour, I could actually do that and only pay for that hour, right? So with that being the case, I'm not going to pick that because it can get expensive, and we'll talk about that in a minute. I'm going to go a little bit above free tier here. I'm going to just pick, let's just do something reasonable. Let's do 8 CPUs and 32 gigs of RAM. This is something comparable to what you might build locally. So now I have to pick a key pair. What this really is it's just simply, we're creating a cryptographic connection here. And we'll just call this demo AWS keys. What's happening is we're building what's called an RSA key pair, and it's a cryptographic secret where the key that's used to decrypt things, that key now only exists on my local machine here. So even Amazon couldn't decrypt my stuff if I didn't give them the key to be able to do that, right? And what that's for, or what we're going to use that for, is when I build this machine, I'm going to have to decrypt the password to log into this machine. And right now, even Amazon doesn't have the ability to decrypt that password. So we're going to leave all this stuff on. It's basically allowing us to be able to access the machine via RDP. Now, ideally, I would change this from anywhere to I would pick my specific public IP address to connect to this. But since this is just a demo, I'm not going to do that. And I also don't want to expose my public IP to anybody that may be watching this. So we're going to leave it set to that for just the demo. I could pick the amount of RAM, the amount of hard drive space. 30 gigs is fine for what we're doing here. So I'm going to just go ahead and say launch instance. Now, when I picked that RSA key pair, it downloaded that key to my machine. And I want to be clear, if my machine gets destroyed or I lose that key, I will not be able to decrypt the password to access this virtual machine. So we're going to go to view instances. I'm just going to go over here and name this. We'll call it AWS demo. And with that instance selected there, notice the connect button is grayed out, or it was, now it just came live. So that means I can now connect. So I'm going to say connect to that virtual machine. We're going to use RDP client. And here's where we need that secret RSA key that we downloaded. Now for me to get the password, I have to upload that key, right? So I have to say decrypt. It's still generating that there. So we'll give it a little more time. All right, so we'll give it just a few more seconds here. Let's go ahead and download the RDP file while we're waiting on that. So notice it says, please wait at least 4 minutes. I'm just being impatient, mainly because I know it takes nowhere near 4 minutes. So we'll just give it a little bit more here.
Yeah, while you're waiting, we do have a question from Christian. He's asking, how safe are migration software solution in an AWS cloud environment?
Migration software solutions. Are you saying solutions that allow you to migrate your apps from premise to AWS? Is that what we're talking about?
Yeah, that would be my guess. That's what he's asking. I guess, is there any security concerns as you're using a migration solution?
Here's the thing with that. So overall, my perspective, like being a security person, my overall perspective on anything when it comes to cloud and security, when you look at it, the primary difference is you no longer control the physical layer, layer 1 and layer 2. So if we look at layer 1 and layer 2, and we think about that, we have to ask ourselves, do we really feel that our own local premise solution, do we feel like we have more physical security resources than Amazon does for an Amazon data service? And most likely the answer is no, we don't, right? So I don't think it's more or less of a security risk. I think it's a matter of, it goes back to what I started this webinar with, is the more you understand about the cloud technologies, the more in position you are to make sound security decisions. Because to be honest with you, there are a lot of security enhancements we get from doing things in the cloud that we just don't have the capability to do locally. So let me go ahead and upload this key now. The key that we created was demo AWS keys. So I upload that and it shows us the RSA encryption key. Now I hit decrypt. So it decrypts the password for me. This is a one-time password. Now I can actually connect to this machine using remote desktop. So from my desktop here on my machine, I'm going to remotely connect to this Windows server in the AWS cloud, right? So I go to my RDP tool, or let's just go to that download. And I'm just going to say open with Microsoft Remote Desktop. And it asked me for the password. So I put that password in that we just decrypted and hit continue. And what you see now coming up on the screen, we're actually logging into a Windows server that's in Amazon. This server doesn't exist anywhere locally on my machine. This server is in the AWS cloud. So what we've done is we've created a little VPC that's ours, which means it's our own cloud in the cloud that's private to us. And in that little private cloud, we've now created a server. And now we just need to give the world access to that server. And we're just going to do it a very simplistic way in the form of a basic website. So to build a website in Windows, it's pretty straightforward. But let me just go and look at and show you some of the things that we have to do really quickly here. So I'm going to go to Server Manager. I'm going to add a role. We're going to make this thing a web server. And again, you're just seeing my impatience here. All right, there we go. So I'm going to go to next. The role that I want to add is that of a web server. So I'm going to scroll down to WW or IIS, which is Microsoft's web service. Say add, go to next again. Just next and all the way through these, tell it to install it. So what it's doing now is it's turning this Windows server into a web server, right? And then the last thing I'll do on this side is I'll actually just put up a little page that says, welcome to our AWS partnership announcement or something like that, February 28, 2024. So you can know that it's like today. So it's building that little web server or the web service on Windows here. And the end goal of this is all of you in here are going to be able to browse to this website and see it. So let it finish. Let's just go do exploring and see if it's got the file that I need there yet. All right, there we go. All right, so it's succeeded, which means it's finished. So now I'm going to go to this folder in the server, the inet or inet pub www root, just simply going to add a text document. I want to show you all how easily you can do this. I'm going to put in there something like, welcome to our AWS announcement. Got some background noise there, Jeff, I believe. Like so. Then I'm just going to save that as a HTML file. I'm just going to call it index.html, right? So just by the naming convention that I use and where I put this file, Windows knows to make that like the default website that's served out. So I can check that by, let me just do this really quickly here. So I can check that by simply in the server going to the local page. So just opening my web browser, in this case, IE or Edge. And just say localhost. And what this will show me is what web page this thing is trying to serve out to the world, right? And it says that right there. So now the last part of this is to make this open to the world so you all can see it. All right, so there's a couple of things. One, I have to give you the IP address that's associated with this. So I'm going to go back to my AWS console to do that. And go to that instance, that server, which is right here. And then I'm going to give you the public IP address. So I'm going to paste that, copy it right here. And then I'm going to paste that into the chat here for the meeting. And if it's not visible to the public, Jeff, can you or Casey make sure?
Yeah, I think you just have to paste it into your browser because we don't have a. We could probably put it in the QA so that people can grab it, I think.
Yeah. So I just pasted it in the chat.
Yeah, right now you're sharing the On24 platform, I think.
Yeah, that's fine. But I just want to make sure you paste that IP in the chat so everybody can get to it, or in the Q&A. So that's a public IP. Now I'm going to also, as Jeff suggested, put it into my browser so that you can see it and see that I can't get to it as well. So I'm going to put that IP in, and this is all you need to do is put it into your chat here or into your browser. And you should just get a window that says page cannot be displayed, or it just spins and does nothing. All right, so let me show you what it is. So what we have to do is I have to go into AWS and make this web server available to the world by opening up holes in the firewall. And in AWS language for local machines like this, that's called a security group. So all I need to do is find a security group for this server, right? So I go and look at it. I go to security. I look at security groups. It tells me it's this one. So I click on that group, and I want to edit inbound rules. So I just click edit because I can see it's only allowing traffic in the 3389, which is remote desktop, which is how I was able to connect to it. But I want you to connect to it. So I'm going to say edit inbound. I'm going to add some rules here for web. And I'm just going to say anywhere. All right, and save that rule. All right, so now what should happen is if you go and put that IP address into your browser again, or just hit refresh, you should now get that page that says welcome to AWS. And Jeff, you and Casey should definitely try to do the same and make sure you can get to it as well. And I'm going to stop sharing now.
Awesome. I think we'll probably wrap up here in a few minutes, but before we do, wanted to take just a minute to talk a little bit about how the AWS training would work if you're interested in, getting one of these certifications and taking a boot camp, and then we might have time for a question or two as well. So yeah, these AWS boot camps are like our traditional Infosec boot camps. If you've taken them before, you should know what to expect. But yeah, is there anything, keep trying, you've been an instructor, you've taught some of these boot camps. You want to kind of set the stage for how one of these would work and what someone who's looking to get one of these AWS certifications would experience over the couple days that they're in there.
Yeah, so for one, look, the one thing that you want to be mindful of is it's going to be very hands-on. So there's a fair amount of lecture, but there's a lot more hands-on. The way you learn AWS, the way you learn these technologies is getting hands-on. I could also tell you from my own perspective, probably the source that was the single most useful outside of taking a boot camp, obviously that's going to have its advantages that you can't really match anywhere else. But the official AWS documentation is a great source to go look at to understand the technologies. Now, to prepare for the exams, obviously the training and the boot camps are going to be key to that. But that AWS official documentation is so well written and so to the point that it's something that you will definitely learn to lean into as you get into these boot camps.
I think we can wrap up here with one question we have that came in from, let me bring it up here, from Ruth. She was asking about the AWS Solution Architect Professional. So I know we're launching with these 5 boot camps, one of those being the associate. But didn't know if you could talk a little bit about, if we'll be expanding to offer, any other ones in the future, or, kind of what the future of this partnership is going to be with Amazon as we, grow in the next couple of months.
Yeah, I mean, in my mind, I definitely want to launch the Solutions Architect Professional. Our hope is kind of that the people that kind of go through the associates will eventually want to go for the professional level for the architect's exam. But I think we're going to launch that regardless. I'm not sure of a timeline, but we definitely want to put that on the schedule as well as one that we offer. if you have interest in it, reach out to your account manager, reach out to the Infosec sales and the customer service team, and let them know that you have interest. If we get enough interest, we can put it on sooner than later.
Yeah, we're gonna, I think, wrap up there. Just as a reminder, this is the first part of our AWS series. So, we covered those 5 boot camps briefly, but as I mentioned earlier, for the next 5 Wednesdays, Keytron is going to be coming on to talk more in depth about each of those certifications, the career options that they provide, all that good stuff. So those will be 30-minute webinars. We're thinking, about 15 minutes to really cover the cert and what you can expect, and then, hopefully get a lot of Q&A in there as well to answer your specific questions about those certifications and training. So hope that you join those webinars if you're interested in any of those. But with that, I think we can wrap up. Thanks everyone for joining us, and a big thank you to Keytron for sharing your expertise and all this news about AWS. As we wrap up, a short survey will appear, and we would greatly appreciate your thoughts so it can help inform what you thought about this webinar and what topics you want us to cover in the future. So thanks again, everybody, and have a great day.